Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Colorwood for YouTube, here to continue my read-along review of Tonight Beguile, Book 4, Chapter 6, The Green Hopes of Doubt. A light wind blew across the emerald green hills of Welshport Island. The morning sun was already in its 6 hours, hitting close to afternoon. The mansion, hidden deep in the Terramore forest, was abuzz with activity thanks to Evie's very important news from just the night before. Today, she was going to announce to the entire house that she and Matthew were going to be married. In the dining room at Terramore, the best china was laid out over the large thick oak table, white lilies and two large silver pots crowned the centerpiece, allowing the aroma of the spring to fill the room like a blanket of perfume, caressing every wooden panel. Evie carefully checked over the table with Jan to make sure everything was perfect for the morning breakfast with the entire family. Today was the day she'd announce her engagement to Matthew Winterbourne. Everything looks perfect, Miss Jane said with a nervous smile. Do you really think so? I want everyone to feel happy when I announce. So, making sure everything from the food to how the plates are placed to every white lily makes people feel happy, Evie said nervously. The energy will set the mood, don't you think? Sure, added. Sure, added, checking over everything once again. Jane optimistically agreed. Oh, wow, Matthew said, walking into the room. Do you like it? Jane asked. It's incredible. You two did all this morning? He asked. Jan really came through. She has been so helpful, Evie gushed as Jan shyly smiled. I'll call in the family, Jane added, as Evie and Matthew took two deep breaths and stood towards the back of the room while the family was brought in unaware of why today's breakfast was called in such a formal way. Everything is going to be fine. Don't worry. I wouldn't bet my life on it. Whatever they say, however they react, it's going to be fine. That's exactly what everybody in Haddonfield says every year in fall. Matthew said. Evie smiled and snuggled up next to him with her arm around his waist, holding on tightly, as if she were preparing for a bumpy car ride. In a way, she had no idea how the Lord would family would react to her moving on from Sebastian with Matthew. They could perhaps be happy for her, but the fact she was pregnant with Sebastian's baby might be a little bit of a struggle for them to comprehend. What happened? We're taking okay. As the two new engaged lovers took their seats, the family entered. Jacob, Celeste, and baby Fabian came in first. Celeste greeted her best friend Evie with a giant hug and a double kiss on the cheek. They hadn't had time to catch up since Fabian's birth. Then Charlotte entered holding Rebecca's hand. Aurora and Nick then came in chatting about the hospital. Nick looked tired but happy. Finally, Genevieve and Jonathan came in arm in arm, followed by a solo Caspian. They entered group, the entire group took their seats and made small talk as the house staff brought in the breakfast. Evie looked nervous, Rebecca could tell, but didn't question the formal breakfast. But to the matriarch of the house, she could tell there was a day where something was going to be announced. She'd been around enough stylish breakfasts, brunches, and lunches to know that when a society women gathered everyone in the room in this manner, there was news to be shared. Rebecca stood up and carefully tapped a tiny egg fork on the porcelain of her teacup. Everyone, attention, please, Rebecca said, surprising Evie, who was getting ready to make her own announcement. I'd like to formally welcome our new guest to Terramore, Jonathan, Genevieve, and Aurora. I know this house could be intimidating in its vastness. Take it from someone who has lived here for over 4 decades. It never gets any smaller. Her joke resulted in a few chuckles, and to Caspian, who has been my beacon, my light, my friend, I sincerely hope that all of you have a chance to visit with him and allow him to show you his gifts. He's given me a way forward after so much tragedy. Evangeline, you especially, I should hope, would benefit from Caspian's good news as he brings to me. The goodness of his nature would do so much good for you in his own life. Had also seen so much tragedy your growing family would appreciate. I know it in my heart. Evie shifted in her east, feeling uneasy with Rebecca's words. She could feel Caspian's eyes locked on her from across the table. It was as if a weight was in his gaze that held her down like an anchor, holding a ship steady on an uneasy sea. Jacob cringed and narrowed his eyes, his uneasy and clear disdain for his mother's obvious and odd obsession with her controlling supposed spiritual guide was palpable. His mother had never gushed over one of her soothsayer, her soothsayers like this. It was clear Caspian's grip on Rebecca was more than just a con job, as Jacob did when he hired Gaspar to manipulate Rebecca in his favor. Caspian seemed to control Rebecca in a mysterious way. Something more potent and powerful was afoot. Jacob's mind continued to go back to the situation Charlotte told him about in the chapel, the heat, the fire, the frightened way Father Ryan fled that day. Caspian, for his part, sat at the table with a Cheshire cat grin, allowing Rebecca to continue to pour love in words all over him, while the others sat and waited for her to finish, feeling uncomfortable by her odd treatment of the man. Was she in love? Some thought. Was she infatuated, beguiled, under a spell? Rebecca was not this way. This was not her nature to be flagrant with affection for someone so new to her life. And who wasn't even family? Jacob shot Celeste a look. She too felt something was odd about the whole situation. Matthew grabbed Evie's hand and squeezed a sign from him for her to take over the bizarre speech. Evie took her fork when she saw it break in Rebecca's gushing and tapped her own teacup. Thank you, Rebecca, for those wonderful words of advice. I truly appreciate them. And Caspian, I would. Evie paused to choose the best word. Like to meet with you, as Rebecca suggests. I'm sure your guidance to her has been most cherished in her time of need. It couldn't hurt, she added with trepidation. Yeah, okay. Caspian lifted a brow. He sensed her hesitation. Evie then continued, I would also like to make a wonderful announcement. Actually, Matthew and I would love to make an announcement together, she added as the guests at the breakfast table all looked around and wondered what this could mean. Aurora knew her daughter Evie like the back of her hand. She could already tell that a loving glow was blowing from the couple. Matthew smiled at Evie. She was thinner. He nodded with his encouragement, telling her to continue. Matthew has asked me to marry him, and I've accepted. The group at the table erupted with cheers, Aurora the loudest. She shot up out of her chair, the napkin falling to the ground, and she rushed around the chairs to the table in a flurry of satin fabric and grabbed her daughter by the shoulders and pulled her in. Darling, I'm so happy, so happy for you both. My joy, all my love, Aurora said. Celeste too rushed over to her friend and hugged her. You deserve this happiness, all of it, she added. Nick and Jacob, Jonathan and Genevieve all cheered. Congratulations, good man, Nick said to his friend Matthew. Wonderful news, Jonathan shouted. Celeste snuck a second breakfast roll as the others were distracted, but Rebecca sat back in her chair next to Caspian and fumed. We cannot allow this, she said to him under her breath. The moment they leave this house, you won't be able to get the child she carries, and if that happens, I will never truly see my Vivi again. You can We cannot stop them, Caspian replied to Rebecca's surprise. What do you mean? Of course we can. We can, and we must. The child you have been pushing Aurora and myself to acquire for you is still a few months of being born. If they should marry, then that fisherman Winterbourne, they'll leave this house and out of our control. This is what you wanted. This is what you swore us to do. Now you give it up so easily, Rebecca replied in frustration. In truth, Caspian didn't give on up on Evie's baby as much as he saw that they were be no use for the baby now, that he knew the child was conceived by Sebastian after he had changed into a vampire. There would be no way for the child to be used for what Caspian needed initially. And to add to it, he had already decided he'd attempt the impossible. He would impregnate Aurora, to then take on a true blood-born child of his own. What would you suggest, madam? Caspian replied coyly. Becca's eyes looked as if they'd pop out of her head. He had created a monster with the pact he had entered into with her. The mere mention of Vivi's name to Rebecca caused her to stop, and nothing to get Vivi back. And if Caspian could do it, if he really truly could do it, then she'd give him anything he wanted, even Evie's baby. But Caspian's change of plans were not Rebecca's change of place. I suggest stop the wedding, stop it all. She cannot marry him, Rebecca said again, as everyone continued to celebrate on the other side of the table. Jacob kept his eyes on his mother and Caspian, whispering. It seemed as though they have already decided on what to do. I cannot seem to think of anything, Caspian began before Rebecca interrupted. Caspian, I know what you are capable of. You've promised me my daughter's return to this world. If I help you with Evie's child, I have promised you that help. I have, I have, and so has Aurora. Do you think Aurora will still remain here once her daughter, Evie, has removed has moved out of her new husband? The only reason Aurora is here is now is because I've allowed it, and because her daughter, who is still a member of my family by marriage, once Evie marries Matthew, that will no longer be the case. Evie will no longer be a member of this family by marriage, and neither will Aurora, Rebecca replied. Caspian realized what Rebecca was doing. She was telling him in words that were veiled that she would kick out Aurora once Evie was married to Matthew. Evie's Lord, Evie's Lord connection broken, Rebecca had noticed Caspian's keen attention to the beautiful Aurora Jordan, and Rebecca was not stepping on the neck of Caspian's budding obsession for Aurora by throwing around her authority over who was going to live at Terramore. If Aurora was gone, he could not find a way to be with her, which means no child, not Evie's, not Aurora's. Caspian would be left with only the bitter Rebecca in a house full of secrets and shadows. Do you understand me? She asked as everything went over Caspian's dark mind. He couldn't believe he was being double crossed and blackmailed by her, but she was doing everything he had brainwashed her to do. He had only himself to blame. Madam, you're obviously right. The two will not marry, and nothing will change here at Terramore. I can guarantee you this. I will handle the fishermen. I will handle everything, Caspian said as his new plot to rid Welshport of Matthew to save his own plan and please the cunning Rebecca was now in motion. The island would not be prepared for what the devil had in store for them in just a few days' time. The light of the midday sun created a bright white streak across the turquoise sky over the entire Frenchman Bay. The two tiny islands in the southernmost gulf of the bay shimmered in the blue sea. Mary Good stood in a window and watched the ocean sparkle with a large Welshport island in the distance. As she caressed the baby growing inside her, she felt her baby's the soft, plump roundness just under her petticoat. She thought about her pregnancy with Charlotte and how different her body felt at the time. Both pregnancies felt special, both felt exciting. This one, Philip's child, felt slightly more distant to her. Although she loved Philip very much, the child inside of her didn't feel the same as when she was pregnant with Charlotte. Mary shook off her worry as just anxiety over everything happened to her dual change dangers of Caspian's looming darkness over them all, and Sebastian's search for the missing coven member. It had been 3 days since Sebastian had taken off on his own to find one of the last descendants of the Sisters of Highgrove Coven in Boston. Mary was beginning to worry. They were running out of time to get rid rid the world of the demon Caspian, and the elusive witch was their last result. Together, Mary hoped for their combined power. She and the witch would join forces, overpower this creature from hell. Caspian wanted to use the unborn child of Sebastian and Evie to empower himself and take over the world one soul at a time. But with no message and no contact with Sebastian, Mary was beginning to worry. All was lost. He'll come back, Philip said, as he entered the room and saw the mother of his unborn child staring out of the window, her blonde hair bright with the light of the sun. Besides, it's daylight. There isn't much he can do in the light, Philip added. If What if something has happened? He was supposed to telegram as soon as he got to Boston, Philip. He hasn't sent any word at all. I fear the worst, Mary replied. Well, then tell me about what you feel. Let it all out on me. That's what I'm here for. Let all your frustrations and fears out so that I can take the extra stress off you, Philip added. She turned to him from the window. His kind, warm face shining in the ray of light came from behind her out of the window. Mary, we made a pact. We were trapped in the turret room at Terramore that we would be each other's confidant. We thought we were going to die in that room, and we came together and trusted each other with our last hours or so. We thought we survived, Mary, but that doesn't mean we still can't lean on each other. So go on, tell me what you're feeling. It'll make you feel better. Mary's concerns melted away for the moment, as she too remembered how they came together, and she walked over to Philip and fell into his arms. She was filled with fears, so many that she couldn't express them all at once. She was worried that then time came, if the time came, she would not be able to compete what she needed to rid Caspian from Welshport and save Evie and her child from his evil grasp. She worried, as a soon to be mother too, that she'd fail Evie and her baby. It came from deep inside these insecurities, as her novice abilities with her newfound powers could end up making Caspian only more powerful and even more dangerous. Sebastian needed to pull through. They needed to find the woman that would guide them in the directions in magic and in the mysteries of their magic. What if I fail? She said, whispering as they held each other. He, much taller than her, bent to his knee and kissed her on the hand. He held her tight, so tight that she could feel his heartbeat on her own. We all fail, but we also get back up from the failure and we push on. Mary, you will do this. You, me, Sebastian, and whomever this other witch is. We'll vanquish Caspian Caspar once and for all. Your faith needs to be the strongest than your fear of failure, Philip said. She turned her head up towards his and kissed his plump lips. They felt so good on her. She had never had this type of love. Someone who believed in her, someone who wanted to protect her, someone who wanted nothing from her other than her love in return. What if Sebastian never returns? He doesn't have to. He can live his life free from all of us anyway, from here anyway, from the shadows, Mary worried. He's involved in this because Caspian sought him out, and his unborn child. He was more at stake than we do. He has more at stake than what we do. He'll come back, Mary. I've known him practically all my life. When I worked for Jacob and became friends with Sebastian, when things matter, he'll never give up. Mary took a breath. Her heart wanted to believe him, but the clocks were ticking time away, time they didn't have. Then Mary turned back to the window. The light from the day warming her face and shining in her blue eyes. They were as bright as the sea and sky. She could feel Caspian was getting stronger in her blood, in her bones. She could sense the powers from the shadows creeping up through the earth and in the trees and floating into the sky on the wings of the owls and crows, floated and flew across both Welshport and Good Islands. Philip was sure Sebastian was coming, but for Mary's doubts consumed her. But she had to be strong because that time would come to fight Caspian, and she would take center stage against him, with or without the help of her sister from Highstrom. The evening felt cooler than usual in the village. The streets were lit up with gas lamps that glowed a particular deep orange glow as various small automobiles and horse-drawn carriages puttered and clopped along the cobblestone streets almost in a musical cadence. As the fresh sea air floated in over shore and into the village of Welshport that evening, Aurora and Caspian walked along the streets on a stroll, getting a bit of a break from Terramore House. He was eager to be with her in every sense of the word. Wherever she was, he wanted to be, and most times she wanted to be away from Caspian, far, far away, his crooked tooth smile and hungry eyes. But his insistence at walking in the village with her was unavoidable, and it made Aurora's skin crawl. Now that Evie's baby was out of the question for him to cruelly sacrifice for his unholy plot, he needed Aurora's to mother his child, and his attempt to woo her began on this night. But she wasn't a sweet, innocent socialite from London, as her name and history recalled. She, in fact, was a fiery New York City woman who just so happened to have married someone from England many years ago and settled into the inner circles of London high stature. She could see a louse coming a mile away. You really didn't have to accompany me, Mr. Cassavor. I really enjoy having some time to myself, Aurora said to him as they both slowly strolled through village park in the center of town. You are a very capable woman. Yes, I know, he replied with a smile. But I wanted to celebrate with you, or at least continue to celebrate. Your daughter's engagement. You must be thrilled with the news at breakfast. Her mind went back to Evie and Matthew. A wash of joy came over her face. I've never seen I've never been so happy, she replied. I wasn't here when she married Sebastian, and I don't know if I will ever forgive myself for being away so long from her, and even Nicholas. I can now make up for all of that lost time and heal with them, Aurora replied as she stopped under a gas lamp. The glowing orange light above her illuminated her like she was surrounded by a bright halo. Okay, where was it? No. I can now make up for all of that lost time and heal with them, Aurora replied as she stopped under a gas lamp. The glowing orange light above her illuminated her like she was surrounded by a bright halo. Her light green dress with matching coat and gloves looked even more green under the light. Her eyes, too, seemed to be a bright blue. In Caspian's glance, he was falling in love. How could he? He needed her to carry out his plans, but seeing the most beautiful woman he had ever come across in the eternity of his existence seemed to clutch his heart and squeeze like nothing he had ever experienced. I think that are a wonderful, wonderful mother. You should be very proud of how equally as kind and special your children are, Caspian said, flirting. He stepped closer to her, so close she could feel his body heat. He reached for one of her gloved hands that she clutched together at her stomach. Her gaze at his her gazed at her with a creepy he gazed at her with a creepy grin that made her stomach churn, and just as quickly as he touched her, she moved her hand away and changed the subject. How long do you think you'll be living at Terranwell? She asked, starting their walk again. For as long as Mrs. Lord needs me, he replied quickly, annoyed that she did not allow him to touch her. Aurora's resistance to him had been evident since the day they met. Unlike Rebecca, who had fallen under his spell over and over again with little to no fight, this ability to unlatch from his mind control intrigued him. He couldn't figure out why she was able to detach from his powers so easily. I can't imagine someone her age would want to be surrounded by a man of your stature so often. I mean, the idea seems so odd to me, Aurora replied, confused and gasping. She trusts me. Why wouldn't she want someone she trusts around her? Aurora stopped their walk again just outside of a small dress shop. She looked in the window, but she was really looking at their reflection. Hers was there just as she suspected, and his was strange. He reflected a darkness, a shadow, something that did not reflect human like hers did. She gasped. He noticed. He grabbed her and turned her away from the window. He stared into her eyes, his glowing yellow uh, eyes, hers filled with fear. She couldn't move in the clutches. The deepening powers he consumed began to fill her body like an injection of poison, slowly entering her mind, her blood, her brain. And then he intensified his powers. The energy was stronger than anything he had done before on a person, not on Rebecca, not on anyone. He wanted to make sure she'd never break from his control again, and while his powers intensified, a flash hit his own mind. It was a signal to Caspian from Aurora's memories, which played out to Caspian like a moving silent film. Aurora walked down a hallway in a home Caspian did not recognize. It was dark. Electricity did not exist in his home. Aurora, stone faced and sullen, carried a candle in one hand and a small bottle of clear liquid in the other. She walked slowly, her heart beat pounding in her chest. She opened the door. Sleeping in the chair was her husband, Robert Jordan. Caspian saw her slowly walk up to Robert with the candle and the bottle. She poured the liquid onto a rag and placed it over Robert's sleeping face. She held it there as Robert breathed it in as he slept. Then his body turned cold. She touched his wrist to check his heartbeat. Robert was dead. Aurora killed him. Aurora crumbled to the floor in tears, tears that streamed down her beautiful face and onto the wooden floor to their London home. Aurora killed Robert to save them from further destitution. She was tired of living the life of poverty that his gambling and loss of money had placed them into. After his death, his life insurance would save her, and she'd use some of the money to come to Welshport. And what seemed like hours, but only seconds, of grabbing hold of Aurora, Caspian let go as her energy poured into his mind, revealing her murderous secret. This is why he could not latch on to her for long. Her skin of murder, her deep cave of guilt, was so painful and so counter all that is human and good blocked him away every time he tried to grow close to her and pull him further into his web of evil. She, while not as evil as he was, had her own shadowy past that would ruin her life if revealed. I think you should let go now, Aurora said sternly, not knowing he now knew her secret. She did, however, feel as if she knew something about him more than anyone else. His reflection, albeit in the glass of the shop, was not human. Fancy meeting you both here, Constable Gregor Rains said, seeing the woman he too was infatuated in with Caspian. Constable! Good evening, Caspian replied, his trance quickly melting off. Is everything all right? Gregor asked suspiciously. We're fine, Aurora said quickly as she rubbed her wrist from where Caspian was holding her. I saw that you had quite the grip on Miss Jordan, Caspian. Care to fill me in? The lawman asked. What? Caspian played coy. Oh, no, 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 no. Nothing for you to worry about, Aurora Gregory said, giving her a chance to tell her side. Nothing, Gregory. It's fine. Caspian and I were just getting better acquainted. It seems as if he has a lot of history that I think none of us were really truly aware of, she replied as Caspian lifted a brow. I should say the same of you, Miss Jordan, Caspian replied to her surprise. I can tell you both that from my point of view, when I saw the two of you were in deep conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong, perhaps a contentious one, someone doesn't grab on a lady that way without being something serious in the works, Gregory passed. Caspian tilted his head and smirked evilly. I don't think you're insinuating, Constable. I don't like your face, Cassador, Gregory said, stepping up to Caspian. That's enough, Aurora snapped. I think I'm done here, Caspian. You can take me home, or you can stay out here and have your little sword fight with Gregory, but I'm going home. Aurora's mind felt scattered. Whatever Caspian did to her, it didn't control her, but he did make her feel unsteady. She had always felt something uncomfortable around him, and now she could see that indeed there was something dangerous about the man Rebecca praised as, as a practical saint. Or knew now she had to convince Rebecca to rid herself of him, and rid the house of him too. His energy, his dagger like evil eyes were too much for her to look at any more. But ever the cunning devil, Caspian knew his hooks were in Rebecca too deep. She'd never listen to Aurora. And regardless of how her own sin of murder kept her from being under his control, he'd find a way to get her to give him his own child. He was creative in his evil works. She would be unable to resist him. Aurora, wait, Gregory said, rushing over to her as she tried to get a taxicab. Gregory, really, I'm fine. I just want to go home, she said, feeling stressed from the overpowering Caspian had just done. Are you sure? You tell me the truth, right? If he hurt you in any way. I can help, Gregory replied sweetly. She looked up at him from the street. She could see the true concern on his face. She smiled at him and touched his handsome, chiseled jawline, and noticed her hand that she was indeed okay, even though she was terrified of what she had seen in the shop window. Caspian mishaps and dark reflection that was neither a man nor human itself. I just need to get home and rest. Gregory nodded in return and looked up at Caspian, who, of course, was back at Aurora's side like a leech sticking to the skin of a man. Caspian could see that there was something between them, something beginning in a romantic way. He didn't like it. He didn't like it in the sense and smell of the birth of new love. I'll take you home, Caspian said, staring Gregory dead in the eyes. Gregory did not let Caspian scare him, sorry. He was indeed falling for the beautiful Aurora. He was worried for her. He could tell she was bothered by the man she was with, and in fact Gregory had this own meeting planned with Jacob Lord in a very short order about Caspian too. The strangeness of it all gave Gregory a knot in his chest as he watched Aurora and Caspian get into a taxicab and putter off. Caspian turned in the window of the glass in the back and smiled coldly to Gregory, taunting him. The devil had his claws in many pies, Welshport, but now Gregory too was involved. The darkness continued to pull over the island, and in no way would anyone be prepared for what was to come. The smoke from cigarettes and cigars mixed with wild laughter and ruckus from wall to wall of the Sirens' Call pub on Main Street in the village. The wood carvings of mermaids and ships were freshly clean and sparkled under the glowing lanterns inside the pub, where Jacob Lord sat alone in the booth toward the back with a foaming beer for the guest he was expecting, Constable Gregory Rains. Excuse me. Rains walked in, his mind still swirling over the strange interaction he had with Aurora and Caspian just 30 minutes ago. The gnawing feeling in his stomach made him feel that there was something tangible to the strange call Jacob gave him earlier that day. Definitely had legs. Rains, politely smiling and shaking hands to drunk Washportians that greeted him in his way to Jacob's booth, quickly sat down and sipped the beer using the yellow liquid to calm his nervous stomach. Slow down there, Rains. We've got a lot to talk about, Jacob said under the glow of an orange lantern. I think I have a lot to talk about too, Rains said. I just had a run-in with Cassador tonight. He was in the village with Aurora Jordan. He is definitely an interesting fellow, so I can see your concerns now. Jacob lifted a brow. What did you notice? He said, hoping to compare notes. Well, there was something about the way Aurora moved around him. Her body language, she seemed uncomfortable around him, and she seemed a bit overbearing. He seemed a bit overbearing, almost like he was trying to convince her of something that she didn't need to be convinced of. He seemed as if he was trying to persuade her of something, Rains explained. Jacob nodded his head. And did she seem to relent? Did she eventually gave in to him? No, she didn't, which I don't think he liked. That's the difference between Aurora and my mother, Jacob continued. My mother seems to be fully under this man's control or spell or guidance. Naturally, I wouldn't care what my mother was doing with her spiritual guides, but this one seems to have something more on her. I shouldn't even say that my mother may not be the warmest person, but she does, she doesn't, she doesn't a skeleton in her closet like the rest of us. In fact, despite her demeanor, she's quite the good person. But what a, but what Castor, but what would Castor want with both of them? Why would he be so interested in making sure that the two of them were in his clutches like this? It just doesn't make sense, Rains asked. Jacob shook his head, sharing in Gregory's confusion. It was a true mystery to them at this point. what Cassian True's motive was for his intense connection with Rebecca and his constant attempts to pull Aurora in the same fray. Both men had different motives for solving the mystery, too. For Jacob, he had always controlled the way his mother's so called spiritual guides behaved, and what information and guidance she actually received from them money talked. And the former guides to Rebecca were pulled by Jacob, with Caspian. Okay, Jacob had no control, and thus Jacob feared his mother would regain more and more of her own anonymity over things that revolved around the family, fortune, and business. Gregory's motives were slightly simpler. He was in love with Aurora, and Caspian's grip, or attempt to grip on her heart, was the devastating blow to his own attempts to woo the beautiful Aurora. There's more, Jacob said, his voice lowering so that the curious ears of the bar could not hear. My daughter mentioned a strange situation a few weeks ago at one of my mother's private masses with Father Donovan Ryan, he explained. Ryan comes to Terramore and performs a mass for anyone who wants to come that lives at the mansion. It's usually just my mother and Charlotte. Sometimes Evie joins, sometimes Jane, and some of the other workers at the house. But by and large, it's just my mother and my child. A few weeks ago, something strange happened, Charlotte recalled. What? Rains asked, leaning in to hear. Out of nowhere, an extreme heat oppressed the room, and I don't mean the warmth of the afternoon came in through the window, or the suffocating of a breeze, or anything like that. Charlotte says it was almost like an intense heat. She recalled it hot as fire. Flowers died. Things began to change in her room. Holy water boiled. She says it was terrifying. And that Father Ryan left the room in a hurry. He was scared. He believed that there was some sort of evil present, Jacob said. Evil present, Rains repeated, putting his thumbnail under his front teeth and biting down on the thought of the nimbling of his finger would push the answers he sought into his mind. What has Father Ryan said about it? Rains wondered as the barmaid brought them more to drink. I haven't spoken to him, Jacob confirmed. Well then, now we have a lead, Constable Rains said with a grin and grabbing onto his beer. Looks like the two of us have a bit of conversation with our good parish priest, Father Ryan. What would we ask him, Charlotte doesn't really know what she saw, Jacob mentioned. Whatever Ryan felt, whatever he saw, he'll tell us. He obviously did feel something, some kind of presence in that room. Charlotte will at least notice, and whatever he saw, he'll tell us. At least then we'll know what the devil is happening over at Caramel with your mother, Caspian, and Aurora. It has to be stopped, Rains. This man, this whatever he is making our lives a living hell. My mother is behaving like some kind of cult follower. She's impossible, Jacob replied, glancing over at his pocket watch. As the two men continued to discuss their next steps and heading off whatever Casper was planning, as he was plotting something even if they truly had no idea how sinister the plot was. Baxter Murphy, the editor of Washport Globe, watched and behind the smoke screen from Drunk Guard cigars. He wondered to himself as he sipped from the whiskey what in the world the village constable and the wealthiest men in town had to talk about. What was the seriousness of the conversation, he thought, almost as if he was pushed over to their booth. He found himself at the table, smiling. Sir, Baxter said, Jacob, looking up at the man who seemed sweaty, nervous, and slightly drunk. Murphy, well, good to see you, Jacob replied, recognizing his own employee at the newspaper his family's publishing company owned. Yes, good sir, to see you too, sir, Baxter replied. Constable, he added, greeting the village's top officer of the law. Murphy, I couldn't help notice the seriousness of your faces over here. Everything okay, I hope, Baxter asked under a guise of friendly concern. Seriousness? No, Rains and I are old friends. That's all. Just a friendly chat between old friends, Jacob replied, lying. Old friends? Interesting. He was responsible for botching several investigations regarding deaths in your family, including Mary Good and your own shooting, yet your old friends, Baxter prouded. Mary Good, oh well, we all know she's gone off to wherever she went. I don't know, but our family dropped the charges on Mary. Quietly, I couldn't, in good conscience, prosecute the mother of my child over something she had no control over, Jacob said. Rain shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with where the conversation was going with the reporter. No control. She was accused 2 years ago of attempted murder of your nephew. There were witnesses, Baxter shot back. Mary was under stress. And we all know the man she was shot was not Sebastian, but an impostor from a botched kidnapping of my late nephew who returned ill and died of his illness. Jacob said, covering up the truth of his own involvement in the shooting and the truth about Sebastian's supposed death. Interesting aside, that's my spies say Mary is on Good Island. She's back, and she's not alone, Back started surprising Jacob as everyone thought Mary had vanished. Is she back? Jacob replied. He thought about what Baxter was saying. The woman he once loved, the woman he cheated on over and over again, the woman he got pregnant, deserted, then took away their child from her, the woman he conned and manipulated into shooting Sebastian, the woman he thought had fled from persecution was back. Should he care? Jacob shook his head as if to brush it off. The gossip Baxter was trying to push and get his reaction. I have to go. And Mr. Murphy, it was good seeing you. If you see Mary, tell her I said hello. We're glad she's back. If that's true, I'm sure Charlotte will be happy to hear that her mother's returned, Jacob replied, not knowing Charlotte already knew. So you're okay with that? Baxter again pressed. Rains got up and got between Jacob, who was now standing, and Baxter. Do you like your job, Mr. Murphy? Jacob asked. Baxter lifted a brow. It seems you do. I suggest you look for the other stories than stories that force you to sniff around my family. Keep that in mind, will you? Jacob said, tapping Baxter on the cheek as he and Rains both exited the Siren's Call's pub. Baxter took a breath and grabbed the rest of Rains's beer and chugged it down. He was indeed on to something. He saw Jacob squirm. The oddest that surrounded that family that owned his paper was slowly becoming a dangerous obsession with Baxter Murphy. Sebastian lit a cigarette he purchased at a small general store near the docks, an inn he was staying at in Boston just off the corner, East 6th Street in the neighborhood known as Hive Grove. The lit red spark at the tip of the cigarette burned in his eyes as he inhaled the fumes. He tried to relax after hours of wandering the winding street of Lower Boston for the final witches Eliza's coven. There were crows he noticed lingering in bunches of 3 and 4 on a rooftop of the inn, all staring down at him like they were waiting for him to do something, for them to act, just staring, waiting, taking in every inch of Sebastian's body and smoke from far in the inn's rooftop. A young woman dressed in a feathery dress and small hat, crown of her head with another giant feather sticking out of it. Her breasts were overflowing the top of the dress. Eyes scanned Sebastian up and down and up and down. Hey, stranger, she said, walking up to him, sniffing his neck. Are you lost? He tilted his head, knowing what she wanted. Are you okay? He asked. Honey, I've never been lost in my life, but I can help you find your way. What are you looking for? She asked. Food, Sebastian grinned. He was a bit hungry, but not food that he could not cook for him. I could eat too. I know a place. Maybe I can take you there. Maybe you can take me somewhere and we can. She paused and pursued her lips. Hercules eat. Sebastian, hungry for blood, human blood, seemed to be unquenched after a bit so ferociously onto the man on the ship 2 nights ago. He felt as though he was getting distracted by the young woman's seduction tactic, would break from his mission to find the witch. Actually, I'm busy too. I'm too busy to eat, he said, inhaling more of the cigarette. Funny, I'm too busy to cook. But that doesn't mean we can't go off and not cook and not eat together, she said, continuing to push him for more. I'm Lenore, she offered. Miss Lenore, you don't know what you're getting into. Trust me when I say this, Sebastian said, as the nightfall began to fill in over the Boston stone streets of the neighborhood. She tilted her head to the side and gave him a half grin. What's a fine man like you doing in these parts anyway, huh? Highgrove doesn't usually see men like you with a soft top hat and velvet gloves. I can tell you're not from around here. Anyone could. So what is it? What are you doing here? Lenore asked. I'm looking for someone, he answered. From the shadows, a cloaked person watched the exchange between Lenore and Sebastian. They were interested in where the conversation would lead. The person in the shadows and the cloak moved closer and hid in the mouth of an alley, and their back up against the brick wall of the building near Sebastian and the woman Lenore in the pink feathers. A girlfriend, Lenore teased. Sebastian shook his head no. A wife, she paused. I'm no longer married, he said, the words feeling painful as they came out. Lucky me, she said. So tell me, who's this person you need to find? Sebastian's instincts told him that letting someone into the secret, especially a secret such as this, with a stranger, would perhaps lead to more trouble than he needed. He thought about his response for a bit, then smiled and answered, a friend. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. You're much more mysterious than I thought, mister. I'm from these parts. Maybe I can find this person for you. What's the name? She asked. Sebastian didn't have a name to Lenore. The mystery continued. But the four hooded fig for the hooded figure watching, this was too close to comfort. They knew what Sebastian was looking for. They felt it in their bones, in their blood. The minute Sebastian's foot touched Boston's soil, every hair on the back of the hooded figure's neck stood up. The hood dropped, revealing a beautiful woman with large brown eyes and skin like soft brown velvet. Her hair was up in the tight curls, and her pink lips were plump and pouted with worry of what was about to happen. Lenore, the woman in pink feathers who continued to push Sebastian, then revealed for a price she could give him anything he wanted. She offered him a place to stay. He declined. She offered him a good long walk on the and talk on the docks where they could do whatever they wanted to do without the prying eyes of people of the city. He declined that too. And just as the two strangers continued to speak, the crows on the roof of the Sebastian's inn screamed loud crows, and they went into the air circling the East Sixth Street and High Road. Then they began to dive down from the air right at the woman and Sebastian. They flew into their hair and pecked at Sebastian's top hat. One after the other, the birds swooped down and pecked and scratched and ripped at the two. Lenore screamed that the birds snapped at her exposed flesh, cutting her, snipping at her more and more. Sebastian was attacked by the black bird that clawed at him. He brushed them off, began walking away into the streets when suddenly a random car turned a corner and almost hit Sebastian in the middle of the street while he fought off the birds swooping down into the sky, screaming in Sebastian's ear. Sebastian fell into the street and then hit his head on a cobblestone, knocking him out. Lenore didn't get off much better. The birds continued to claw at her. She cut her neck, scratched her chest, bit at her ears, removing the earrings. She screamed and tried to run down the street, but the birds came down on her like a giant blob of black feathers until finally she fell to the ground and they fell onto her from the sky, eating at her flesh. In the alley, the cloaked woman rushed out and pushed the man from the car off of Sebastian and helped him up in his dizzy state. "What are you doing? Is he okay?" the man asked the mysterious woman. "He's fine, but she's not," the mysterious woman said as she rushed off with Sebastian, who walked, crooked, and moaned with his head dizzy in pain. A group of people from the shop and the maid from the car rushed over to the giant mound of crows. They were covering Lenore, who had stopped screaming. They shooed the birds away, who showed signs of lessening aggression. The aggression of the birds slowly dissipated thanks to this woman who had taken Sebastian. All the powers in her small fist that was clenched behind her back as she helped Sebastian. To parts unknown, she was the reason for the crow's carnivorous actions. As she walked away with the groggy Sebastian, her fist became released as she grabbed onto his side. The release of the birds took the flight, moving away from Lenore's, revealing to the people who came over to her pet body covered in blood. Her lips were cut, her eyes were plucked, her pink dress now covered in blood from her open stomach. The mystery woman used her as a distraction, one that went to death, so that she could easily escape with Sebastian. The man she sensed was part of the same supernatural world she was a part of. Her magical instincts were right. And strangely enough, he had found the missing witch, or she had found him. She was the missing final witch of the coven of the Sisters of Highgrove. She was Jacqueline Gray. Then, only blocks away, 5 or 6, where the crow attack occurred, Jacqueline and Sebastian entered her tiny apartment. His head spinning, her mind unsure what to do with this man, this vampire. She paused as he was on the floor of her home, on all fours, trying to get the pain in his head to go away after the car hit him. But she had to act fast. For her safety, she didn't know what the monster wanted of her. Then she closed her eyes, took a breath, and a bolt of energy came from her open hand and landed on Sebastian's body, knocking him unconscious once more. For now, he was her prisoner. For now, she was safe. All right, guys, it's the read along. It's going to be really interesting to see what everybody does and see what Caspian does to Matthew and just everybody involved. Shit's going to go down. Really, really, really good. Link to Benight and Beguile is going to be in the description box. Go check this out, guys. Have a good day.